Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are here checking in live. This is the August 11th, 2024 edition of the Boxing Source podcast. We're checking in here. We got, of course, what had happened on Saturday night. We wanted to dissect everything that was going on in that particular day, as you had a lot of action. You had something over in Las Vegas. You also had a fight card in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And hopefully I'll be able to touch on what happened in the card in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But of course, he had, an intriguing fight in the super welterweight division that took place at the Michelob Ultra Arena in the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Nevada, as you had the WBC interim super welterweight championship on the line. Serhii Bohachuk was defending that WBC interim title against Vergil Ortiz Jr. So for Serhii Bohachuk, he was coming in there with a record of 24-1 with 23 wins by way of knockout, winning the interim super welterweight title a few months ago, pretty much like about 5 months ago, against Brian Mendoza with a unanimous decision win. Very good performance there by Serhii Bohachuk in his win over Brian Mendoza. Of course, Mendoza had been, very competitive there at 154, had lost to Tszyu, but also knocked out Sebastian Fundora, So, for Bohachuk to score that win, that put him up there within the top 10 or so within the 154-pound division. And he was coming in there to defend the title against the undefeated Vergil Ortiz Jr. Came in there with a record of 21 wins by way of knockout, 100% knockout ratio. It wasn't nothing like, whole thing with that Edgar Berlanga run with, those first round knockouts or whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? But with Vergil Ortiz, of course, he had been coming up the ranks there in the welterweight division, had moved up to super welterweight earlier this year, had two fights this year against Frederick Lawson and against Thomas Lauren May, but both of them were, first round salvage victories. So this fight here against Serhii Bohachuk was going to be one that was a very intriguing battle there for Vergil Ortiz. As I said, Bohachuk is there, floating around that top 10 in the 154-pound division there. And, it has a very good style there for anybody out there at 154. So, going into this bout, a number of fight fans were intrigued to see, how Vergil Ortiz Jr. was going to, approach this particular bout. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of had a good little, this was a very, very good action fight. And some folks are saying that maybe it would be a candidate for fight of the year. Well, we're going to break that down here a little bit. Shout out to those that are listening live. Of course, you got it through YouTube. You also got it through Twitch. We also got it through Rumble. So big ups for everyone that's listening live through all of those particular platforms. Shout out to Jay Pylon in the building. Been supporting here. Jesus Sim, that's also been part of the movement here on the Boxing Source. I agree with what Jesus Sim is saying here. I'm gonna see. He has his initial thought. He says Vergil has lots of work to do to improve, like defense, better patience, more jabs, less arm punches, change the speeds, stop loading up so much and hit less. I'm like, you almost like explained the whole fight right there. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, man? Oh yeah, big up small guy Trill in the building, man. What's going on with you, man? All good, man. We had some good action, like I said, some good action on Saturday night. Like I said here with that Vergil Ortiz versus Serhii Bohachuk. And, coming off the first round, you just see, a lot of action from both of these guys. Serhii Bohachuk was, just, bouncing up and down, trying to come forward, go through with the jab and everything like that. But also Vergil Ortiz was establishing his jab. And, at least in the first round, like Vergil Ortiz was, going in there quick, being emphatic with the jab, moving his head a little bit, stepping in and out, as far as like foot movement to kind of like throw off the timing there of Serhii Bohachuk. But at least there with Bohachuk, he kind of stood firm and was still going forward, not going off of his game, not going off of his rhythm there in the first round. And, even there within that first minute, you seen that, Ortiz was looking to be the more active fighter, was throwing the jab, but also was throwing counters off of what, Serhii Bohachuk was doing there early. And then, about 20 seconds later, you had, Ortiz, he was still getting in the groove or whatever it is. And he was like backing up, but still, throwing jabs off his back foot, throwing punches off of his back foot. And then halfway into the first round, Vergil Ortiz was backing up. He was backing to the ropes and he threw a jab. And then Bohachuk came around with a counter right hand and that, hit Vergil Ortiz and put him down to the canvas. And oh man, initially there you had our guy, the referee, man. That was Dave Chappelle, man. Dave Chappelle came in there and Dave Chappelle ruled it as a slip. I'm sorry, man, but you can't tell me that he don't look like Dave Chappelle, man. Come on, man. Harvey Duck, hey, shout out to Harvey Duck, but come on, man. He looked like Dave Chappelle, man. Y'all know that. He initially ruled it as a slip, and you saw like Ortiz. He was like getting up real quick. He's like, no, that was a slip. That was a slip. I was like, nah, bro. You got hit with that right hand, and it hits you pretty much around the ear, man. That's the thing, So even after that, Ortiz didn't try to get off of his rhythm. Still tried to be consistent as far as like being active as much as he can there with his punches. And then at the end of the first round, you kind of like seen it as a good even matchup. And then starting in the second round, you had Vergil Ortiz, try to get back in the groove, throwing punches to the body to, try to, invest in the body there of Serhii Bohachuk to try to slow him down. But Bohachuk, props to Bohachuk, man. Props to him. He was still, on his game, still consistent, still coming forward, still, throwing a jab at, intriguing times or, different times there to throw off Vergil Ortiz. Sometimes the timing there from Vergil Ortiz, timing from Serhii Bohachuk got to Vergil Ortiz, even though Ortiz was kind of like scoring upstairs, downstairs, throwing jabs upstairs to the body, and then getting to the inside and working the body to try to slow down Serhii Bohachuk. But Bohachuk was taking all of those shots, man. Like, and going in later into the fight, you've seen what Vergil Ortiz was trying to do, trying to go all in to the body, and it still, didn't really affect the, the pace of Serhii Bohachuk. But, even with the activity of Bohachuk, at least there from those second and third rounds, you seen Bohachuk, even though he was consistent with his punches, they didn't seem as emphatic as what Vergil Ortiz was doing. You seen Vergil Ortiz kind of like sit down on a lot of his punches there. So once they did land, they looked like they had, more effect or sounded like they had more effect on them. But, I would say like, for those couple of rounds after, that knockdown that was initially ruled as a slip at first, then Vergil Ortiz got back in it. But then, props to Serhii Bohachuk again. He didn't really allow, Vergil Ortiz to like build off that momentum and kind of like rack up rounds, so to speak, right? And I felt like Bohachuk was able to get back in it in the fourth round, staying consistent with the attack, trying to be as effective as possible with his punches and efficient with his punches there, while Vergil Ortiz kind of worked on trying to hurt Serhii Bohachuk and not get back to what he was doing initially there in the first round. You know what I'm saying? So it was more about Serhii Bohachuk staying consistent, being as effective. There, it didn't necessarily have to be as accurate, so to speak, there in reference to what Vergil Ortiz was doing, but it was like still effective. You know what I mean? So as long as like Bohachuk wasn't, thrown off of his game there, so to speak, he still felt like he had that pace to, stay, pretty much like stay in the fight and kind of like see if he could build a lead or at least like be in competitive quarters there with Vergil Ortiz, there at that point. So, props to him on that. And he was able to, do that. And then, what was it like, after the fourth, then that's when they said, oh, you got Bohachuk scoring that knockdown. That was in the first round. So instead of, having, the corner say, you had the mentality that, or, maybe it was a 10-9 round that, Bohachuk won or a 10-9 round that Ortiz won. Now they scored a knockdown. So it's like, oh, snap, that could be a 10-8 round for Bohachuk. So now you're seeing there about round 5, that pretty much makes it like, a really close fighter off rip. You know what I'm saying? But round 5, like I said, Bohachuk was, still, being there sharp and everything like that. But it was more of like, like I said, tapping punches and stuff like that. Like Jesus M, yeah, you were mentioning that, like the touch punches from Serhii Bohachuk was, doing his thing, and it was very effective there. But, Ortiz was still responding, throwing counter shots, throwing shots to the body, trying to, get the most out of those punches. And, it was mainly about, okay, what did you think was what stood out? Was it, the consistency there from Bohachuk, or was it the, hard punching there from Vergil Ortiz, at that particular fight? You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Boxing Magic here, joining in the YouTube chat. Here it says, well, if Majmal fought like Ortiz and Crawford would have been put to sleep. Interesting. New Era Boxing and Bets TV in the building, man. Salute to you, man. Salute to you. Yeah, I was going to go back there into that, the 5th round or whatever it is, Bohachuk, I felt like, it was, him staying consistent. It was just that, he just had those arm punches. So, at the time, it didn't really look like it was affecting Ortiz, but later on down the line, the accumulation of those punches started to get to Ortiz there, of course, with, the cut that Ortiz had suffered. He pretty much like had something on his nose and then something around his eye there. So it was like, hey, Bohachuk was really doing work, staying on the grill there of Vergil Ortiz. And, even with Vergil Ortiz, trying to, land counters, whether it was with the right hand or left hook, didn't really stop, Bohachuk there from basically going forward. So, I felt like it was like Bohachuk's rounds there from round 5 and round 6, and thing about it was like, hey, how is Vergil Ortiz going to, respond, right? But the thing is with Bohachuk, it was still about, him just landing, continuing to come forward, continue to, work off the jab and then stay on Vergil Ortiz, even with Vergil Ortiz is trying to, come forward at times and, and also, him kind of like headhunting, that was when you seen Vergil Ortiz kind of miss a lot of those shots when he was headhunting, pretty much like throwing one shot at a time, or trying to work off a counter to see if he could wait on Bohachuk there, but that's the thing there, you know what I mean? And then round 8, you had it another one, you know what I'm saying? And the thing about it is like, hey, got another one where it was a time in the Bohachuk that caught Ortiz before Ortiz was able to throw, so he was able to land, a left before Ortiz was able to throw, and the momentum of Ortiz just had him swinging all the way down. So he just came all the way forward and then his glove touched the canvas. So at that time, hey, they were like, nah, man, that's a knockdown. That's a knockdown. So that, pretty much like had Ortiz like really in a bunch, because it's like, oh, now we got 2 knockdowns scored against you up until this point in round 8. And that's when you had Ortiz pretty much like battle back and really do a lot of punching and damage there to Serhii Bohachuk. Props to Bohachuk once again, because a lot of those punches, it seemed like maybe Bohachuk wouldn't have been able to get through that. There were some uppercuts that were landed there on Bohachuk that I felt like it really affected him. But he still was able to weather through that through the rest of that round and get through the end of round 8. So for round 8, that's a really key round there. That's a really key round there, because you had that knockdown scored, but then after that, you had Vergil Ortiz pretty much like dominate that round. You know what I mean? And then the last 4 rounds was very intriguing. You know what I'm saying? Because it was like Vergil Ortiz just had that urgency that, oh, okay, now I might have to win all of these 4 rounds in order to get back in the fight. But also with that, you had Ortiz kind of stop doing that whole head hunting thing and kind of get back to throwing the jab. He was kind of, getting back to throwing the jab, building off of that, and then being able to, get more power shots in after, landing the jab or throwing the jab there. So at least at that particular point, you didn't see Vergil Ortiz head hunting all too much, but trying to just build off of seeing if he could get success, throwing the jab, and then working from that in order to, land more shots on Serhii Bohachuk. Bohachuk, like I said, still game, still, coming forward when he can, still landing shots when they were openers there on Vergil Ortiz there. But, it was the overall work rate, or at least for me, I thought it was the overall work rate there from Vergil Ortiz that pretty much like got him, at least for me, the last 3 rounds, right? You know what I'm saying? So went through those full 12 rounds. So that's the first time that Vergil Ortiz was going through pretty much the full scheduled rounds there, whether it would have been 8 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds, whatever. But of course, like he had 21 fights and before then and 21 knockouts. But this is the first one that went the full thing and went to the scorecards and had the scorecards. And it said you had Max DeLuca scored about 113, and it was overruled by David Sutherland and Steve Weisfeld that had it 114 to 112 in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr., right? So he is now the new WBC interim super welterweight champion, giving Serhii Bohachuk his second professional loss of his pro career. Of course, his first one was there where he got stopped by Brandon Adams, right? And like I said, I mean, you had the scorecards there, like I said, 113, and 2 scores of 114, 112, which means as far as like round by rounds go, one judge had it 7 rounds to 5 in favor of Vergil Ortiz, and the 2 judges that had it in favor of Ortiz as far as like the scorecards go is 8 rounds to 4, in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. Now, for me, I didn't see where it was 8 rounds in favor of Vergil Ortiz. So, I kind of like, felt like that was tough to, try to only give 4 rounds to Serhii Bohachuk. That was kind of wild right there. Wanted to see if I could, get this thing pulled up. Shout out to Jake Donovan who had this the scorecards up here. So I'm gonna see if I can share them, right? All right, so you got this thing here, right? And you have it, of course, like all across the board there on that 10-8 round. And then, I see like, those first 4 rounds, all 3 judges look like, they were in agreement, right? So through 4 rounds, you had it, 38-37 in favor of Serhii Bohachuk. And then through 5 rounds, it was like, all the way even. It was even at that particular point. But then, you kind of like seeing scorecards deviate a little bit. You had, what was it, David Sutherland that had rounds 5, 6, and 7 in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr., while you had like Max DeLuca have it like for Vergil Ortiz just, round 5. He didn't even give him rounds 6, 7, and then you had the thing there with the 8th round with the knockdown, right? And for Steve Weisfeld, he had rounds 5 and 6 there in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. But it was just those last 4 rounds where you had Vergil Ortiz, basically sweep. Well, he swept the last 3 rounds, rounds 10, 11, and 12, which I felt like he did win 10, 11, and 12. It was just like that round 9, basically, right? Where it was a little bit of a split there, so to speak. But even with that, like if like say for example, if David Sutherland had given Vergil Ortiz round 9, then he would have had Vergil Ortiz with what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He would have had Vergil Ortiz 9 rounds to 3 if he had scored round 9 in favor of Vergil Ortiz. So, it pretty much was up in the air, so to speak, when it came to that. But I'm telling you, man, like 7 rounds, yeah, I would be able to give Vergil Ortiz 7 rounds, but 8, that's a stretch there. That's a stretch. I just couldn't. Maybe it was a thing there with round 9, but like, 8 rounds, I just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't see where Vergil Ortiz, even though you had something there with the activity, that you got to be able to get something there in favor of Serhii Bohachuk. So maybe it was like rounds 5 or round 9 that you could say, hey, maybe Bohachuk may have had something there in its favor there to kind of like have it scored that way. Leroy, I had it, 113, 7 rounds to 5, but 113. Want to have my great guest here with me, of course, a great contributor to the Boxing Source here, wants to talk about, see what he had about the fight. The boxing academic is in the building there. And I know that, we had like a conversation about, or you had something there in reference to the scorecards that you wanted to see it. So I been able to share that to you before you were able to come on. So what were your thoughts on the fight and the scorecards that you see here?
So I did not score the fight. So my comments will be more from a high level, perspective instead of being critical on who I think should have won. Obviously, looking at the fight, it was a close fight. You don't do yourself a favor getting knocked down twice, even though the second knockdown, arguably he won that round, and that to me could have been a 9-8, a 9-9 round. Excuse me.
Or 9-9.
Yeah. Because he won. Literally every second after that knockdown, and he was very motivated. Bohachuk was. It's sort of like he was reeling on that second knockdown, but he obviously offered him problems. Some things that I saw was, I wonder, or at least I question, I wonder if Ortiz was wondering, like, so we saw how he started fighting in the beginning. He was like, come meet me in the middle of the ring. And his first plan A was that he expected to knock him out. And when that didn't happen, you saw him sort of be like, okay, I ain't gonna be able to keep this pace up. Or maybe he didn't say I can't. Maybe he was thinking more so, will I be able to keep this pace up, seeing that I haven't been 12 rounds? And so you could see that sort of thought process that he was like, hey, okay, I didn't get him out of there. Let me sort of, use my stick and make sure I don't tire myself out, because it doesn't look like he gonna stop his pace.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sort of, in a sense, lost confidence that he would knock him out. I ain't saying that he lost confidence per se, but he was less, he believed in it less, to where and that could have been the endurance, or it could have been the fact that Bohachuk was durable. But either way, he altered his course, and then he started, using his jab a lot more.
Word.
The thing is, Ortiz was more skillful than Bohachuk. However, like, to me, he had more tools. Bohachuk, had a high guard. At times, like, there were times when Ortiz had his hand down, and then Bohachuk would just throw a shot. It's not to me, it doesn't look like an amazing shot, and then it just lands clean, because Ortiz's hands are down, and maybe part of it is because he's tired, but it's just like he ain't ready, and he's not necessarily in position to defend himself. And he literally got hit with a bunch of punches like that, where his hands are down and he getting hit clean. Not necessarily that it hurt him, but like, he just getting hit clean. And so enough of those punches is like, okay, well, who won that round? Because he got hit clean quite a few times. But he was the one, to me, more than not, when he was imposing his will. It sort of reminded me of the Terence Crawford fight, where when he decided to let his hands go, for the most part, I don't think he could miss. Bohachuk did well in certain spots, like blocking. Other times he blocked with his face. But I think when Ortiz let his hands go, he definitely looked to impose himself, even though he was the quotation mark smaller guy. The thing that I sort of said last night, which, Ortiz took shots, right? But I wouldn't say so I'm gonna say the comment I made, and then sort of where I'm backtracking off of it. So the comment I made last night was, I think that these guys will lose something following this fight that they won't have for the next fight, or they will have a little less of. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, well, Ortiz got hit, but not at the same sort of intensity that Bohachuk got hit. Now, I stand on what I say for Bohachuk, because Bohachuk is one tough SOB. He took a lot of punishment.
Yeah.
And now him, like, he can't keep doing that, because his body will betray him. And this the start of it, like, taking all that punishment. It's gonna be a time where he think he can take it, and then that punch resistance just gonna go. So I think Bohachuk
would be like, what would be the breaking point there for Bohachuk?
Yeah, and I think that this fight is a catalyst for him sort of experiencing that breaking point, because he took a lot of punishment. He just, I guess they sparred with each other or something, but
yeah, they did.
Yeah. And so he committed to, in his mind, that he wasn't gonna quit, because he got hit with some shots. Obviously, in his mind, he felt that, everybody feels this way, right? When they fighting their sparring partner and they don't feel like they are the sparring partner. But he felt like he could beat him, and I see why. I don't think Bohachuk. I think he probably is gonna lose some in this fight, because he took a lot of punishment.
Yeah, he did. He did take some punishment there. I was still surprised that there wasn't a point where he there was like something where he was like briefly stunned, but nothing where it was like he had like any danger of being knocked down. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, for me, I was like, props to him for being able to take all of those punches there, whether it was to the body or upstairs. But also the same thing there with Vergil Ortiz Jr. Like, even with those two shots that had him knocked down, there were other, like, he got hit with some right hands that were like really, really effective there from Bohachuk. And I was like, maybe he could be in some trouble with that too. But he was able to, withstand all of those other shots. It was just those two knockdowns that, really had, Vergil Ortiz a little bit behind there, so to speak. But
yeah, let me say one thing to add to what you said about the scorecards.
Mm-hmm.
So 6. Hold on, give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna see. I was like looking at this, right? And by let's say round 8, right? After that knockdown, you had it where 2 judges had it in favor of Serhii Bohachuk, right? And one of them had him like 4 points ahead. So after the 8th round, at that particular point with Max Luca's card, Vergil Ortiz had to win all 4 of those rounds in order for it to even be a draw at that point. But in the other one for it, like Steve Weisfeld, like it had it 2 points ahead there for Serhii Bohachuk. So he gave him those gave Ortiz those last 4 rounds, where you got that 114-112 score, and then on the other one there where it was like even there, you kind of like had it to where they said like Bohachuk won round 9, which like I said, that round 9. You did have that great start there from Vergil Ortiz coming off of the tail end of round 8, but then Bohachuk was able to respond there too. So that round 9 is pretty much I think that's the one where the fight was basically up in the air, so to speak. Whether it could have been a majority draw or something. I guess there where they scored it was in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. So got to look at round 9 as, I guess, the round to kind of like see where everything was at.
Yep. Yeah, you completely right on that one. And speaking of the number 9, the judges agreed on 9 out of the 12 rounds. 6 of those agreed upon rounds were for Ortiz. 2 of them were those 2 knockdown rounds for Bohachuk, and then 1 extra round they all agreed on for Bohachuk.
Yeah.
So 6 rounds that they had a consensus that Ortiz won, and then 3 other rounds where it was like it's what somebody liked in the round.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was there. But it was definitely a good action fight. For both of these 2 fighters, and a number of folks will say like, what, we will want to see it again. But in this particular case, with it being for a WBC interim title, they don't necessarily have it to where you're obligated to have a rematch there, even though you came in as the world champion or the interim champion there in the case of Serhii Bohachuk. So while Vergil Ortiz is there, he stays undefeated. They're now 22-0, and Serhii Bohachuk has the 2nd loss of his professional career. Like this one is like an instance where it's just a tough break for Serhii Bohachuk, because in his mind he probably felt like he did enough to to win the fight, so to speak, or whatnot, and it just fell in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. by those, like I said, 8 rounds to 4 for Ortiz and those 2 scorecards there. So
yeah, I mean, he valid in feeling how he feel. I mean, they both are valid. It's a pretty close fight.
Yeah. I was gonna see if I could pull up I think it was something there from Serhii Bohachuk there real quick. So I'm gonna see if I could pull that up, because I kind of like said he kind of had some things to say, or maybe it was somebody else, I don't know. But I had tried to get into or like some type of interview if I could do that, and then I guess it says where you said like, those who understand boxing know what just happened. That's what he put on the on his X page here, or whatever it is. So there it was. It was like He said, "Those who understand boxing know what just happened." And he had the promoter there, Sean Gibbons, is one of the responses. He says, "Well, coming from Tom Loeffler, Serhii didn't lose the fight; he lost the decision." I guess that's kind of that you could say it, that was it, but like I said, tough break. Tough break. I mean, I didn't see where his pace was thrown off by whatever Vergil Ortiz was doing. There, like I said, props to him for that. And on the flip side though, Vergil Ortiz had to deal with the adversity there, particularly after the 8th round where that second knockdown was scored. So for some, you could say that, hey, props to Ortiz for responding the way he did after that second knockdown, that he knew in his mind that he had to win all of those rounds following up to that, or try to get a knockdown to try to get the score back or whatever, but still did what he had to do in order to score those last 2 rounds. At least for me, like I said, rounds 10 through 12, he pretty much like won those last 3 rounds in order to try to at least either get it back even or to win the fight. But at that particular time, I just felt like it was even, like 7 rounds to 5 basically there for Ortiz. But with the 2 knockdowns, that's a 113 scorecard.
I got a comment toward that.
Okay.
I don't think us as fans, we should expect this in every fight. However, when you have more even, more competitive fights, we then get to see more of people than what we normally would not normally see of them. From the fight last weekend where Crawford is fighting a bigger person, who's weird, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky style. Yeah.
Tricky style. So that's a big part of it. And who like dancing. And then today or yesterday, where Ortiz is fighting somebody that, probably with them having familiarity, that made the fight more entertaining for us. But nevertheless, fighting somebody who's bigger, who can take the punches, who ain't gonna fall after the second or third punch that he hit him with, and who can sort of weather that storm. And that sort of leads me to something that you probably gonna ask later. But so I'll let you ask that question. But it's sort of what they alluded to before the fight.
In reference to Vergil Ortiz and his overall standing in the division, would that be it?
Well, what's promised for him next?
Well, you had at least after the fight, you had everybody's favorite guy in boxing, supposedly Turki Alalshikh, step into the locker room of Vergil Ortiz Jr. and say, "Hey, man, hey, you know what? We're gonna try to go ahead and make that fight between you and Terence Crawford next." And I'm like, I mean, if that's what you may think it could happen, is whatever, right? But that's the other thing though, is like, what would Vergil Ortiz standing be here in the 154-pound division? Him now being the new WBC interim super welterweight champion, and you come up with potential matchups that are out there at 154. I mentioned it in the question up above, is you have of course Terence Crawford, who defeated Israel Madrimov to win the WBA full world title there. So he's up there. You got Tszyu, who was supposed to, fight Vergil Ortiz, but, had been scratched from that scheduled fight that was supposed to be last Saturday, as part of that card in Los Angeles. So now you're going to have Tszyu, eventually scheduled to fight, Bakram Murtazaliev for that IBF super welterweight title. So, maybe they could, eventually have that fight later on down the line to see, what would happen if, Vergil Ortiz is able to fight for a full title, because we still don't necessarily know what the situation is going to be there with Terence Crawford, as he's like, the WBO interim champion while being the WBA full champion. So it's a whole crazy scenario there at 154. So yeah, go ahead.
So you didn't say this, but I'm gonna put you on the hot seat right now.
Okay.
Are you saying that Turki Alalshikh's wishes is wishful for him to prematurely say? Because even like when he said, "Hey, we want Bud and Ortiz," and then
Okay.
De La Hoya was like, "Well, what about Tim Tszyu?" He was like, no, we ain't worried about Tim Tszyu.
Yeah,
we, we,
we ain't worried about it.
we want Bud Crawford. And then he finally was like, you know what? He said, you know what? You do the personality. You know what? We can do that. We can do that. Whatever he said, but he kind of convinced him own self, like
Yeah,
we could do that.
But that's kind of like strange because like I was saying before, they would have had that fight on the August 3rd card in Los Angeles, and going into it, like what was it with the first couple of weeks when they were announcing the card and what fights were going to be in the card. When they announced Vergil Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu, it seemed like fight fans were more intrigued about that fight than what they had with Terence Crawford and Israel Madrimov. But eventually you see that Crawford Madrimov ended up being better than many expected it to be, in a sense. But still, with Tim Tszyu and Vergil Ortiz Jr., that would have been a very intriguing bout there in the 154-pound division, particularly with like I said, Vergil Ortiz Jr., that would have been his first, real test there at 154. And then for Tim Tszyu, him coming off of, like I said, getting hit with a people's elbow or something, or whatever folks want to call it there, but ended up losing by decision to Sebastian Fundora. So, that would have definitely been an intriguing bout at that time. But yeah,
I still don't think you answered the question. Is it wishful or not?
I think it's wishful, and I'll bring another thing on to it. I'll bring another element to it. I think Tim Tszyu, having that angle of saying, what, we're pushing towards going after Backroom Milozaliev for the IBF title. That's number one. But number two is there's like been a couple of organizations that have been involved with Turki Alalshikh. And those organizations are the World Boxing Council and the World Boxing Association, where Terence Crawford is the WBA super welterweight champion. Vergil Ortiz is now the WBC interim super welterweight champion. So if you have the WBC and the WBA one way or another, being involved with Riyadh season, at least that could kind of like say, hey, they're having some ties with Riyadh season and Turki Alalshikh. So I say that, it is probably more likely that we could see Vergil Ortiz versus Terence Crawford than, like a Tim Tszyu being in the mix next or whatever, even with the thing there with Sebastian Fundora. I did have the conversation with Fundora's promoter there, Samson Lukowitz, who says that, he's trying to, get into negotiations for that fight with Terence Crawford. But, it's almost like, whatever Turki Alalshikh says goes when it comes to Terence Crawford, so that's what I got on it.
So under what scenarios does it make sense? Because would it effectively, like, it'll be a good fight, but would it effectively be feeding Ortiz to Crawford? Would that effectively be what happens if you sign that fight? Would you be feeding Ortiz to Crawford, or is it such a even fight that we don't know?
I don't know if it's an even fight, but I don't think it's going to be something where Ortiz is being quote unquote fed to Terence Crawford. But they do have a little bit of history, so to speak. Sometime back, like in 2021, Vergil Ortiz was like coming up the ranks in the welterweight division. And there was like at one point where he had fought Maurice Hooker and stop Maurice Hooker. And Maurice Hooker was like, one fighter that, Terence Crawford was like, hanging around or something like that. And Terence Crawford was in attendance at that particular point. And soon after, it headed to the point where Vergil Ortiz Jr. was the #1 ranked contender in the WBO. And some folks thought that, hey, maybe at that time he would have been the mandatory challenger for the WBO welterweight title. But eventually that didn't necessarily materialize. And what ended up happening was ended up being Shawn Porter. That was the WBO mandatory. And that's how we got, Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter in November of 2021. So now here we are, fast forward, it's almost, 3 years later. I'm like saying, well, here you are once again here, Vergil Ortiz Jr. You got a, WBC interim championship. You were ranked fairly high, in the rankings there for these other sanctioning bodies, right? So why not go ahead and, have this particular, bout? You know what I'm saying? I had him, I think I had it to where Vergil Ortiz was ranked #2 in the WBO and the WBC, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, like if you're gonna have Vergil Ortiz Jr. that highly ranked or whatever it is, then why not go ahead and have that fight happen right now?
So you think the time is now for him, or is it a bit too premature?
I say the time is now. You never know when you might get another opportunity. At least at this particular point here for Vergil Ortiz. The only other matchup that I potentially see for him is within his, promotional company with Charles Conwell, right? And it's pretty much, I think it's pretty much up to Golden Boy at that point, because it's like, okay, either we can have this, in-house fight, whatever, with Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Charles Conwell, or just go for it all at this particular point and, have a fight with Terence Crawford. I know a number of folks who was talking about, okay, what was it at welterweight? When Terence Crawford won the undisputed welterweight championship, who folks say that could have been, next in line that wanted to challenge Terence Crawford? Jerome Boots Ennis. And you had some people that were detractors are saying, hey, Boots hasn't necessarily, quote unquote, earned his stripes yet, or doesn't have enough experience yet. But I'm like, hey, if it's not now, then when will it be? Same case goes here for, Vergil Ortiz Jr. Like I said, you were #1 contender at one point in the WBO at welterweight. And at that time, I guess, maybe Golden Boy said, hey, maybe he's not ready right now. But now you're here up at, 154 pounds. It would be your first opportunity to fight for a world championship. You haven't really fought for a full world championship in your career yet. So why not go ahead and have it right now? Like I said, I mean, the only other option that he has, at least at this point, within the promotional company there, is Charles Conwell. And Charles Conwell, kind of like has had a couple of fights, under Golden Boy. He had to win over Nathaniel Gallimore back in April, and in that same card that Vergil Ortiz was involved in yesterday, Charles Conwell had a easy win over Kiari Gray there with a second round knockout. So it's like like I said, it's basically up to Golden Boy. Either try to continue to build up Vergil Ortiz and have him in a fight against Charles Conwell, or just go for it right now. Go after Terence Crawford. Maybe see, okay, you seen what happened there in this fight against Israel Madrimov, and say, hey, maybe I could have something there against Terence Crawford that makes me say, hey, I do have a very good shot at beating him. So those are the two. I feel like those are the two options there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. at this particular point. And with them, kind of like fighting within a week of each other, it still gives them an outside shot that you could have them two fight before the end of the year. We could get it done in December. I know that I was talking about, hey, maybe there could be a potential match between Crawford and Boots and just have that in December. Well, here's another option for Terence Crawford, Vergil Ortiz Jr. in December. Why not? Yeah, I see that. I don't know. I think my guy Box Academic has had to step off here for a little bit, but I wanted to like touch
I'm still
on.
here. I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is I'm not trying to be political, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I would definitely favor Terence Crawford, and I'm trying to see who stands to lose more, because this would be closer to, it ain't a guaranteed win, but in my opinion, it would be closer to a guaranteed win for Crawford than it is for Ortiz.
Yeah.
Neither here nor there, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. I feel you. It's just about like, are you willing to go ahead and take that chance, with your fighter, or with like I said, with a promotional company or with a camp, Vergil Ortiz Sr. or whatnot. Like if they feel like, hey, do they feel like Vergil Ortiz Jr. is ready to take on that particular challenge? I'm like this. I'm like, hey, Israel Madrimov felt like, hey, he was able to go up to the challenge, and I mean, yeah, he does have a very extensive amateur background, but it was still 10 or 11 fights that Israel Madrimov had in the professional ranks, going up against a guy that some consider as the top pound for pound fighter in the sport, and he was able to give Terence Crawford a tricky matchup. But maybe that could be something that I guess Vergil Ortiz could kind of like move forward from and see if he would have a good shot against Terence Crawford. Now his style is of course completely different than Israel Madrimov, and with Terence Crawford having that kind of like counter punching style, I don't know, that might be a real issue there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. I said,
especially with him getting caught with that left hook every time.
Yeah, pretty much, man. What is it? Jesus M said earlier, Vergil's strength hadn't developed yet, or especially at 154. Facing a lot of guys that I guess very experienced who have man strength. Yeah, that's the thing too. Is whether it's guys that have a lot more experience, or have like been camped out at 154 for some time. That might be a little bit of an issue there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. But at the same token, we're talking about Vergil Ortiz Jr. that has had some issues with weight himself. Particularly there in the welterweight division, there was, him having a potential bout there 147 there against Iamana Stanionis, and that fight had been delayed multiple times and ended up being completely scratched because of Vergil Ortiz's issues, whether it was with weight or condition or whatnot. So he still had to like say, what, I ain't gonna be down at 147 anymore. I'm gonna, campaign in 154. So, now he's at 154. He has a few fights down at 154. Now it's like, okay, is he comfortable to, be able to make 154 pounds here, for a few more fights or a couple more years to kind of like set up those bouts there, but potentially against a Terence Crawford or a Tszyu or maybe a Sebastian Fedorov, although I think that's like a really outside shot. But still, those are various fights that could be out there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. if he's able to stick there with that being at 154 pounds.
I don't think his career bodes well for him going up too many more times, because I mean, from what I saw, he has skills, but there are certain things that he does to where, like, when he evading shots, he's still getting hit with shots. And so let's say you fighting heavier handed people and you're getting hit clean in a sense, it's going to affect you with these bigger guys that are weight draining down. to these higher weights. So, like even yesterday, they got familiarity, but when you fighting smaller people, you can bludgeon them. But you fighting bigger guys, yeah, it's just gonna be more difficult if he keep going up in weight.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of like had that a little bit in a sense there with Terence Crawford last weekend too, with him going up in weight. And one of the things that I kind of had as far as like one of the intangibles that Terence Crawford had, going up from 135, 140, 147, is his lower body movement or lower body strength that he wasn't able to be pushed around by a lot of those guys, whether it was like at 140 or at 147. And you kind of like seen that when he had his fight against Sean Porter and against Errol Spence. But here against Israel Madrimov, you didn't necessarily, you'll get that there, from him. So it was kind of like something that I felt like was very noticeable in that fight that Terence Crawford had against Israel Madrimov. And I kind of like say, hey, I'm very interested to see, what would be next there for Terence Crawford against a fighter there within the 154-pound division, how he approaches the fight. But like I said, with Madrimov's style is like unique. It like as far as like the other contenders at 154 pounds, they really don't have a style that like is similar to Israel Madrimov, man. Big ups to L Boxing in the building, man. What's good with you, man? And Off the Ropes Boxing and MMA says, I think Boots versus Ortiz is a better matchup for Vergil. It could be, given their, their level of experience. Yeah, I feel like, it could be a better matchup for Vergil. Could open up more things there for Vergil, but it also could, expose them for a lot more there with a guy that is, could be as fast or faster.
I said speed kills.
Yeah, speed. Yeah,
Off the ropes. Can you reply why you think it is a better matchup, please?
Yeah, if you can, man, if you're able to do that, or I might see if I open up the discussion here a little bit more here, within the next few minutes or whatnot. But I was saying there, at least after this particular fight, like even well at 147, I favor Boots Ennis. At 154, I would favor Boots Ennis because I don't think that Vergil Ortiz has won the overall activity to really kind of like frustrate Boots enough. And if you've seen like at least early in this particular bout that you've seen there with Vergil Ortiz and Serhii Bohachuk, that Bohachuk was able to land with the counter punches, right? Boots can do that and come back with like a 3-punch combination. That would be a problem. That would be a problem there for Vergil Ortiz. Plus, he's able to go from orthodox to southpaw too. So yeah, I wouldn't kind of like favor. I wouldn't favor Vergil Ortiz Jr. in that potential matchup. That wouldn't be a good one for him.
Especially if he got balance issues on these arid shots that aren't like debilitating shots, but they still, making him fall off because of his balance.
Yeah. He says like, yeah, if he said, both fighters do have questionable defense, that would be fought in the booth. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, even with Boots Ennis, he does still have some things to work on when it comes to defense overall. As far as like, swatting off or slipping and countering and that type of thing. I think that he kind of like, either tries to block or, kind of, I guess takes punches in order to throw something back. You know what I mean? But I think that he would have to work a little bit more as far as like slipping counter, moving in and out. And he does have those abilities. I feel like he does. It's just at times you just don't see it from him. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'll be very interested to see what happens there with Boots Ennis. Of course, after him getting that stoppage win over David Avanesian, there at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, I like to see what will be next for Boots Ennis, especially with him being the IBF welterweight champion, and maybe there might not be as many options there at welterweight for him at this point than, maybe a couple of years ago. So that's why they kind of hinted at him moving up to 154. But even with that, I kind of like said it earlier. What was it? Some time ago, a few days ago, when I was talking about, Boots potentially fighting Terence Crawford. I said, well, with him being the IBF champion at welterweight, why not just go up to super welterweight and then see if you could try to angle for a fight there against Bakum Lazalia? But you see here, Tszyu pretty much like beat him to that. So you're gonna have Tszyu, vying for that IBF super welterweight title, and with Boots Ennis now it's like, okay, what can we do here? Although, hey, if they're not able to get something between Vergil Ortiz and Terence Crawford, hey, I would not mind a fight between Boots Ennis and Vergil Ortiz before the end of the year. Like, some people have been demanding that particular fight, so why not go ahead and do that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's a message there for Turki Alalshikh. You talking about fights that people want to see? How about that one? All right. Boots Ennis versus Vergil Ortiz. How about that at 154 pounds? Let's see if you could actually put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, when it comes to that. You know what I'm saying? And I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind that one bit. But for Vergil Ortiz, getting this win, close win, there's a number of things that he would have to work on here against a number of these other contenders there at 154 pounds. Shout out to Elda Boxing there, my guy on YouTube just had something earlier where he kind of broke down a number of those fighters at 154 pounds, pretty much like went down like, what was it, like the top 10 or so fighters at 154 and other contenders that are out there at 154 pounds that show like, we still have 154 being a very good division with very good fighters that you could have all of these fighters fighting each other. I said then, I was like, from 2019 to 2022, you had a very good run at 154, culminating with Jermell Charlo winning the undisputed championship at 154 pounds. And so we could, basically get it here once again to see if, all of these fighters could fight each other. And then, when push comes to shove, we might be able to, get ourselves an undisputed champion here once again. Oh, and that does include Jermell Charlo, who did say that he's coming back at 154 pounds. So can't forget Jermell Charlo and how he fits into the picture at 154 pounds. You know what I'm saying?
Who are the belt holders?
The world champs?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the WBC and the WBO world champion there in Sebastian Fundora. You got the WBA champion there in Terence Crawford, and you got the IBF champion there in Bakum Lazalia. So those are the champs there in the four sanctioning bodies right now.
Nice. And Tszyu fighting for the IBF.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just say Tszyu wins and gets the IBF. And Terence Crawford fights. I think they would fight each other before they fought Terence Crawford.
Who? The Ortiz.
Tszyu and
Ortiz. Yeah. So then that leaves the thing.
Well, not Ortiz. Tall guy.
Oh, you're talking about Fundora.
Fundora.
I don't know. So you got Fundora. We gotta see what Fundora's next fight's going to be.
Because it could be Errol Spence.
Yeah, it could be Errol Spence, but that's still outside shot. So that's why it's like we got to see if the WBO is going to say, hey, okay, Terence Crawford, won the WBO interim title. Now you got to go into negotiations. Oh, you said that, hey, we heard that you said Sebastian Fundora is pretty much in a good enough, state to get back in the ring by October or something like that. Okay, cool. Let's see if the WBO is going to push for that fight between Fundora and Terence Crawford now, as they originally did back in April 1st or whatever it is. Shout out to my guy Tip Ellis in the building, man. He said Vergil signed that new contract with Golden Boy. No way they were letting them loose. Hey, it's like, Vergil Ortiz is about the only guy that got left at Golden Boy that where they could, have any chance of doing some type of marketing with him, I guess. So
I agree, because you just saw his response. He tried to think so fast when Turki Alalshikh had said like Bud and Ortiz, and he was just like trying to think and what he was gonna say. And then he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And you knew he was just saying it because the camera was on him.
Yeah, that's true, man. It's true, but it's like, man, Golden Boy, man. I mean, I know that they be having a number of fights or whatnot, but as far as like overall marketable stars, they got like I said, they got the thing there with Vergil Ortiz. They lost a dude there that beat Devin Haney, and then you got what was it? They got the thing there where they got to see if they could have their fighter William Cepeda, and if he'll be able to contend for a world title. But William Cepeda, as far as like his overall popularity, is still good amount below what they got here right now with Vergil Ortiz. So they're trying to build Vergil Ortiz and see if he could be the next star that you got there for Golden Boy Promotions. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing there, man. So that I got to see how that is. So he's off the rope says like what Turki and De La Hoya afraid to let that happen. That's why Turki has needed time to change the whole protecting that. I mean, maybe in a way, but it's still like, okay, is he really in that particular thing there where he's willing to like make, like I said, the best fights possible or whatnot? Like I was saying the previous week or whatever it is, you still had like great fights in the sport of boxing over the past 2 years. We had great fights, great matchups. We had, like I said, we had the thing there with Spencer Crawford. You had the thing there with Inoue versus Fulton. You had undisputed world title fights at the super lightweight division. You had the thing with Devin Haney versus Vasyl Lomachenko, undisputed in lightweight. So we've had a number of great fights, over the past few years that didn't necessarily involve Turki Alalshikh. It's just, what he's doing, particularly in the heavyweight division. Maybe you have it to where those matchups could be like they could build these other fighters up to a certain level in the heavyweight division. But with these other divisions, it's still like a wait and see approach, particularly like right now here with 154. We got to see how that goes with that too. So.
But I do like one thing that Turki Alalshikh, I feel like, is sort of promoting. Guys lose, but he doesn't allow that to paint them. He still brings them on, obviously, if their effort is there. And even with guys, when their effort aren't there, with some guys, it shouldn't be that sort of dictates you to come and be on the screen.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you have what was it like? Going from, at least from the heavyweight division, you had the whole thing with the Day of Reckoning. You had fighters that won or lost, and that particular card, they still were able to get on to a following card there, whether it's through, I think, either that Joshua versus Ngannou card in March, or even with the Queensberry versus Matchroom or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, for example, you would have like a Joseph Parker there, who was getting on his way back. Previously, before he got onto that, he had been stopped by Joe Joyce, but then he was still able to get a win there against Deontay Wilder, and then in his following fight, he was able to defeat Zhilei Zhang. And for Zhilei Zhang, he had knocked out, Joe Joyce twice. He had been a guy that, had been the WBO interim champion. He faces Joseph Parker, ends up losing to Joseph Parker, but then turns around and defeats Deontay Wilder. So you're still going to have this particular instance there when it comes to the heavyweight, so to speak. Like, for example, Jarrell Miller. Jarrell Miller lost to Daniel Dubois, 10th round stoppage. He was able to be on last weekend against Andy Ruiz Jr. Ended up being a majority draw, but a number of people felt like he won that fight. So he's doing a lot there within the heavyweight division. Just got to wait and see how he maneuvers there with these other divisions out there. If you got something like that, you know what I'm saying. Tip Bayless says would just realize Jamal Charlo is still undefeated. Yeah, I mean, he had that extended layoff, and then last year he fought Jose Benavidez Jr. and got that decision win. So hey, we gotta see what's gonna be next year for Jamal Charlo. I don't know if he's gonna be fighting in 168 or 160, probably at 168 still, and we still gotta see what's up with that. And we haven't heard much there, coming from Coach Ronnie Shields in reference to that. And Ronnie Shields has been very busy over the past few weeks here with a number of fighters that he has under his belt. But here with Jamal Charlo, as of right now, I haven't said much there as far as like him potentially getting back in the ring here any soon. So it says, but once they complain, it's like inactive. People respect fighters that test themselves over fighting once every 2 years, even if they lose. Yeah, I mean, it's more about inactivity. I mean, I kind of get your point there with that off the ropes. You fight like once a year, or you're fighting once every 2 years, and people aren't gonna say you're that relevant in the overall boxing scene. So you gotta be able to like keep it to where you stay fresh. And I kind of like explained that when it came to Terence Crawford, right? Because he was coming off of the momentum of winning the undisputed welterweight championship against Errol Spence, but now it took like over a year for him to get back in the ring. And well, you see what the numbers are for his fight against Israel Madrimov. I mean, you can be a top pound for pound fighter or whatnot, but if you're not back in the ring when people want to either see you, or when you have that that high of being the undisputed champion, then all of that kind of like fizzles off. And now when you're finally back in the ring, it's like, oh snap, oh now he's back in the ring. Who's he up against? Who's that guy? So I mean, yeah, that was the thing there, man. But yeah, activity is really key there when it comes to boxing, and particularly when you're a notable fighter or high profile fighter. Like in comparison, look at what Nayo Inoue is doing. He's having at least a couple fights a year, or Alexander Usyk having a couple fights a year, or Canelo Alvarez. You know what I'm saying? Or like I mean, you just go down the line as far as like pound for pound. You got Canelo, you got Usyk, you got Inoue, you got Ben Rodriguez. You know what I'm saying? You might have even like Dimitri Bivol if you have Dimitri Bivol involved. So that's the thing. You got to be able to stay relevant, stay active. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So there's that, man. That was like mainly the main event there on that Mandalay Bay hotel joint, with Vergil Ortiz getting that majority decision win over Serhii Bohachuk. Like I mentioned earlier, you had earlier winners there, the super welterweight division, and Charles Conwell, who could potentially have that outside shot to fight Vergil Ortiz next if Ortiz isn't, put in a fight against Terence Crawford, I guess, later this year. I say if you want to, keep that, I guess, supposed buzz going with Vergil Ortiz, try to get him in that fight with Charles Conwell, and just wait until the next year to try to get a fight in there with Terence Crawford. You had like other winners on there, like Kenneth Sims Jr. With a stoppage over Jonathan Romero. Was pretty much like beat him down for 5 rounds to get that. Cecilia Brækhus, still active there. Where she at like 42 years old, she's still active in the super welterweight division. getting a decision win over Marcelo Cornejo and Gabriela Fundora, the sister of Sebastian Fundora, winning by unanimous decision over Daniela Asenjo for the IBF flyweight title. We had mentioned that there with of course Samson Lukowicz of Samson Boxing. He is also a promoter there for Gabriela Fundora. So there's that. Thanks there off the ropes there. No problem, man. Thanks on that. But yeah, that's mainly the card there. I kind of liked it because that particular fight card kind of ended at around like 11:30 or something like that p.m. Eastern time or whatever.
Nice, respectable time.
Yeah, nice, respectable time there. With that. So even though it had like a good amount of fights on the card, they still like started the main card, or the main portion of the card or whatnot. You would say at a good enough time to where the main event like started about like 10:30 or a little bit after that Eastern time, and it ended by 11:30. So I have no issues with that. I kind of like that more than any of those other joints where you kind of like have it where main events don't start until like 12:30 a.m. or 1 a.m. Eastern time, man. Like, nah, that can't cut it. That can't cut it. Real quick there, that like this is like what we're about an hour and 15 minutes in. Wanted to like touch on one other thing that happened in the sport of boxing. There was another fight card in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was part of a top-ranked card. Was headlined by the IBF featherweight championship fight with Luis Alberto Lopez defending his title against Angelo Leo. Of course, Angelo Leo was a former world champion there in the super bantamweight division. Ended up losing that title to Stephen Fulton there. And kind of like worked his way back up, getting some wins. They're moved up to the featherweight division. Had a few fights over on ProBox TV. Scored some knockout wins on ProBox TV. One notable one earlier this year against Mike Plania. Was able to get a knockout win there, and then another fight in April where he was able to score a decision win that kind of put him in position to contend for a world title, and then got in here against Luis Alberto Lopez, who had the IBF featherweight title for some time. Is a very, very tricky fighter. Had sent Mick Conlon down to the canvas and almost like put his career to almost a complete stop. But if Matt was on here,
I thought you was about to say sent him to the shadow realm. I thought you was going to say that.
Shadow realm. But he just put him down there in the corner and just said, nah, man, we can't have Mick Conlon be beat up anymore than that. But with Luis Alberto Lopez, he has a real tricky style. Was able to get a decision win over Joet Gonzalez, who has about like 50,000 world title shots for some reason. I don't know, man. But after that, he had another defense here that was in March, going up against Angelo Leo. I think some people were like looking at this saying like, hey, this could be something where Angelo Leo might be able to, get an upset here, and this one was a pretty good scrap. You had a couple moments from both fighters. Angelo Leo was was a patient fighter, even with the herky-jerky style of, Luis Alberto Lopez. And, Lopez was, kind of like landing some good shots from various angles, or whether it up close, you had some good action up close, whether, Lopez was landing with the uppercut, or you had Angelo Leo landing with the body shots up close. So after about 8 or 9 rounds, you kind of like seeing that this one was very close. Then in the 9th round, you still had like some good close action between the two, so it was still like a toss up. But Angelo Leo was performing in front of his home crowd, was like getting a little bit better with the timing of Luis Alberto Lopez, landing some good counter shots with the right hand or whatever it is. And then, 10th round started up and they were, pretty much like in close quarters, basically leaving off from what happened in the 9th round, good action in the 9th round. And then pretty much a minute into that 10th round, Luis Alberto Lopez, threw a left jab, and he was just lazy with the right hand, didn't have a right hand on the phone. And Angelo Leo just came in there with a left hook and just hit him square in the chin. Bam! It just floored Luis Alberto Lopez, man. And I was like, yo, nah, that dude is flat out. He is knocked the flip out or whatever it is. Knocked the fuck out. And that was it. It was a wrap, and I don't know what the referee was doing, man. I don't know if it's maybe, what they do over in New Mexico or whatever it is. If they had to do a 10 count. But I'm like, after getting hit with that shot, ain't no way Luis Alberto Lopez was gonna be getting up, man. You might as well waive the count because he wasn't getting up from that. So Angelo Leo gets a knockout win. He is now the new IBF featherweight champion, and that was a definitive knockout of the year candidate, man, because that was just a perfect left hook counter by Angelo Leo to get that win. And with it being like up in the air, like the scores were like 85, 86, pretty much on either side. Like, well, two judges had it 86-85 in favor of Angelo Leo through 9 rounds, and one judge had it, 86-85 in favor of Luis Alberto Lopez after 9 rounds. So those last 3 rounds really could have been, the deciding part there in this particular fight, but Angelo Leo just ended it definitively with that knockout victory. So he's a new IBF featherweight champion. He's looking to see what's going to be happening there within the featherweight division. But props to him. He built his way back up after having the loss there to Stephen Fulton. And he said, maybe he could have a potential unification bouts there in the featherweight division. I know that you do have Rafael Espinoza there as a world champion that's on the top rank. That they still don't know if they could have a rematch between Espinoza and Robeisy Ramirez, but you could have that as a potential matchup, or maybe a fight there against Nick Ball, who recently defeated Raymond Ford for that WBA belt. And Angelo Leo even mentioned potentially having a fight with Naoya Inoue, but Inoue has his bout where he defends those undisputed super bantamweight titles against TJ Donnelly. So there might be a lot of potential matchups out there for Angelo Leo. Maybe he's an outside shot, but maybe there could be a rematch between Angelo Leo and Stephen Fulton there in the featherweight division. So hey, I wouldn't mind that either, but props to Angelo Leo for him getting that knockout win over Luis Alberto Lopez, where he just got knocked out, and it was just bad for Lopez because he had to go ahead and go on the road to basically fight and win these various matchups. We had the thing there where he defeated Josh Warrington to win that IBF featherweight title. That was over in the UK, and then of course he had that knockout of Mick Collin there in the UK as well. So he hadn't really had like a thing where he could fight in Mexico or anything that kind of would have like a Mexican contingent, so to speak. So him having this knockout loss, that's a definite setback for him because it was basically his style is what kind of failed him in this particular sense. You know what I mean? So whether he could try to angle for a rematch against Angelo Leo or have a fight against another one of these top contenders in the featherweight division, is he going to be able to change his style up overnight? No. So what can he do in order to, either try to win in a potential rematch or get him a potential shot in another world title here later on down the line. I'm not all too sure about that. Academic, were you able to catch that fight?
No, I only saw the knockdown replay. I didn't really watch the fight. No.
Gotcha there. But I mean, yeah, that was somewhere, Lopez just got caught slipping, and you can't necessarily have that when you're in a high profile bout. And like I was saying earlier, I mean, he was getting caught with a few counter punches, but they were mainly right hands. It was just that he just did not see this left hook going back at him, and that was it. It was just night for him. It was over. It was a wrap. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see. What happens there with Luis Alberto Lopez there, because that was a devastating way to lose. Devastating way to lose in that particular sense. What else we had? We have like some action coming up next week in the super middleweight division. You're gonna have Christian and Billy in action over there in Canada. He'll be facing Sergey Derevyanchenko in the main event there over in Canada. So Christian and Billy is a top contender there in the super middleweight division, and looking to see if he'll, I guess, angle into a fight for world championships, which is currently being held by Canelo Alvarez, who just had completed a media run over in New York and Los Angeles with Edgar Berlanga. And while the one over in New York seemed a little bit tame, the one in Los Angeles was, it was, oh my goodness, it was something. Yeah, Edgar Berlanga looked like he was, trying to talk a lot of smack to Canelo and, to Caleb Plant. That was like one moment there from Canelo Alvarez. He told Caleb Plant, he's like, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him for you. Don't worry." I was like, "Oh man, that was like really, really funny there." But I really don't feel like a number of people are giving Edgar Berlanga much of a chance here against Canelo Alvarez, and that some people are saying like, if Canelo doesn't end up stopping Edgar Berlanga in this one, that I don't know, man. Some people might end up writing Canelo off, for this particular point, So that's supposed to be what, September 14th, about what, 4 or 5 weeks from now. So we'll see, man. You had something on that?
Yeah, write him off by not knocking. I mean, do you expect a knockout? Yes, but let's just say he's tougher than what we expect him to be. Maybe we learn something about Edgar Berlanga. I don't think we will. I expect Canelo to knock him out. And heck, if he even fought Caleb would beat him.
Mm-hmm.
How Caleb beats him, I don't know. But I mean, Caleb should beat him. So I mean, I think he's doing the right thing as a lower tier fighter. If you want to be in the conversation, you kind of gotta make some noise and get them, sort of bring them down to your level, and then that allows you to have an audience with them. I mean, he's doing the right thing, like sort of Art of War-ish. But he probably shouldn't piss Canelo off because that'll mean that Canelo is throwing punches more than just trying to counter and stuff. So that's not going to bode well for him.
Yeah. And the thing about it is like, I just don't feel like there's something that Edgar Berlanga has that'll make, Alvarez respect him. He's, of course, like talking up a good game and all that type of stuff up to this particular point. But, you're there, like this is your, 23rd professional fight. A number of the fights that you had, especially during the run that he had those first round knockouts, those were basically, fights where they were like kind of giveaway fights for him. Up until the point where he fought Devon Nicholson, and then you kind of like seen the deficiencies that Edgar Berlanga had as far as like being able to put punches together, setting up shots, setting up traps, and all that other stuff. And for those next few fights, 4 or 5 fights, you kind of like seeing those deficiencies where he wasn't able to make those proper adjustments to either try to stop these fighters or have them in serious trouble, so to speak. So while he was able to bake up decision wins, like even in the super middleweight division, like there were guys where we kind of like say, hey, you know what? If you put him up against like a Diego Pacheco or a Christian and Billy, or maybe I would say a Lester Martinez, so to speak, like would you pick Edgar Berlanga? Probably not. So like him going up against Canelo here in this case is almost like, yeah, you have Canelo as an overwhelming favorite. All right, well, we got here coming up here. What is it? Of course, it's our guy, the chef himself, Brother Terrell is in the building, man. What's going on, Terrell? Oh, it seems like he's having a connection issues here. Let's see if we could get back in here a little bit because he may have some thoughts on the Vergil Ortiz win here. Let's see. We're going to try this here once again. Terrell, you're able to connect here with us?
Yeah. My mother's calling me. She's stopped it. Okay. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Mike? How's it going?
Oh, it's going well. I just want to tell you about yourself. How dare you get on the phone call with us and not answer the phone call with your mama? What's so funny? Why are we laughing?
Yeah. No,
I'm just playing. Hey, we love you for it. Thank you.
It's all good, man. Every day, man. Every day. But now, I was just listening to the leader for the Canelo Berlanga, stuff like that. Like at the recent press conference. I mean, the only thing I took of note from that was the size difference between Canelo and Berlanga. But we know you can be the bigger guy, but doesn't mean anything, right? And as we already know, skills pay the bills. And in regards to Canelo versus Berlanga, the experience alone is so vastly different. And even as JR, you just saying, does Berlanga beat a Billy or somebody like that? We don't know. And the main reason I wanted to jump in, I know on the end of the podcast, right? I was talking to a friend of mine last night, Puerto Rican. He said, you know what? He said, actually, the people down in Puerto Rico do not support or do not claim Berlanga like that. So Puerto Ricans in New York, they do claim him. That's where he's from, things like that. But people home, they do not claim him like that, right? Of course, he's Puerto Rican, but and we started to talk about your past Puerto Rican greats, Cotto, Trinidad, people like that, and where they had the big presence from back home, right? And as was support from New York and Puerto Ricans pretty much everywhere, right? But Berlanga does not have this, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty curious. It's like even when Eddie Hearn first tried to go after Canelo to get this fight signed, what was he saying? Oh, it's the big Mexican versus Puerto Rico rivalry, right? He never said, oh, that Puerto Ricans back home don't really rate him like that. He never said that. And honestly, when you look at this as a totality at this point now, Eddie Hearn's going to talk this boy into an ass whooping. That's what, and he'll get a nice paycheck, things like that. And it's kind of boxing is a business because we know there's people that deserve to fight more than Berlanga. We already know the top name in Benavides. We know that, right?
Yep.
But I find it very curious to say that he said the people back home in Puerto Rico do not support him like that. They know he is, but he's not quote unquote really a home son like that. That's pretty funny.
Well, I mean, you kind of like had a couple of instances like that before where, fighters would have like a Puerto Rican type of background, but didn't originally come from Puerto Rico. So, like for example, you may have something there with like Danny Garcia. He kind of like had that particular issue there when it came to those within Puerto Rico. They didn't necessarily like fully accept him there, so to speak, in comparison to like a guy that's like could be like homegrown, like a Miguel Cotto or a Tito Trinidad. You know what I'm saying? So with Edgar Berlanga, you pretty much like had that same thing. Is that those in Puerto Rico, don't necessarily recognize Edgar Berlanga as one of theirs, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? I mean that's kind of in comparison to like other modern fighters right now. You know what I'm saying? Like Amanda Serrano, right? Or like you could have Amanda Serrano's, like she had her fight, over there in Puerto Rico. Didn't end up she didn't end up fighting in Puerto Rico, but they're able to have all of that interest there for Amanda Serrano there in Puerto Rico. Or like a Subriel Matias, who became a world champion there, but was able to have a fight in Puerto Rico, ended up losing, but still they had that support there for someone like a Subriel Matias. But here in the case of Edgar Berlanga, like him being basically based in New York and all that type of stuff, you can't necessarily say, okay, he even though he has someone like Fat Joe like supporting him or whatnot, and like saying not necessarily, he can't necessarily be I guess one of us, or how that viral saying goes, they not like us or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So, Puerto Rico, they ain't necessarily claiming Edgar Berlanga in this particular sense. So, as far as like this being like a, like a Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry, this ain't like Cotto Canelo. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot different.
Definitely, all marking like I said, Eddie Hearn has talked us just getting to an ass whooping on a national stage. That's what's going to happen.
I mean, hey, Berlanga is kind of like embracing this quote unquote heel role. It kind of like goes into the whole thing there as far as like marketing a fight. This is no different than professional wrestling. You have a heel there in professional wrestling, and it talks the game and all that type of stuff, and gets booed by the crowd and all that. And so the face of in wrestling, just goes in the ring and see if he could beat him up and get the win. So I guess in a sense, Canelo could be, a kind of like a face, and some people claim that he is the face of boxing. So why not have a heel of boxing? In this particular sense. I mean, this is almost like similar to another fighter that kind of like has been in the discussion for being a face of boxing, and Gervonta Tank Davis when he went up against Rolly Romero. You know what I'm saying? So maybe it has something like that here in this case coming up on September 14th. There for the unified super middleweight titles there. So that's how they got coming up September 14th. Just waiting to see how that fares up with that. So since you was just getting on here, you got your reaction to what happened there with Vergil Ortiz Jr. in his bout against Serhii Bohachuk?
Yeah, I would just defer to I was listening to the podcast. I kind of waited till you guys would done with that. I didn't get to consume those fights in that regard, so I just would defer to you guys on that. So,
oh yeah, were okay, yeah. So like I was saying there with Vergil, I felt like it was more of like him running 7 rounds instead of 8. So I agree with like that 113 score. Very good action between Ortiz and Bohachuk. Bohachuk, like I said, props to Bohachuk, keeping his composure over the course of the fight. We dealt with like a number of things there with Vergil Ortiz and the attack of Vergil Ortiz, and on the flip side with Vergil Ortiz, he dealt with 2 knockdowns in the course of the fight there within those first 8 rounds. So he had that sense of urgency in those last 4 rounds, and he was able to perform the way he did there in the last 4 rounds in order to basically make it an even fight, at least for me. But 2 judges just had it in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. for him to get the win and him to stay undefeated there now in the super welterweight division as a WBC interim super welterweight champion. So that's what I got there in reference to what had been going on. I had to see if there's like any other updated news here, but I haven't necessarily seen it here as of yet. So maybe we'll kind of like get some more updates as things go along here in the sport of boxing over the course of the week. Yeah, this is pretty much it as far as I'm concerned here in this particular aspect. We got to see what's going to be happening here in action next weekend. But also, they're supposed to have another press conference with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson next Sunday. So I don't know if I'll be able to make it or not. But if I do, I'll be able to update y'all on that. It's going to be part of a sports weekend there in New York City. So that's going to be pretty big. But I'll see if I'll be able to, go ahead and make that press conference. And if I do, I'll update y'all on that. But as far as like this particular episode of the Boxing Source podcast, that brings this to a close. Props for everyone that has been listening live. This will also be available in audio form through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you use for podcasts. There, like I said some time ago, I was working on getting every single episode from the Boxing Source from the beginning up until now uploaded. So all of them are available on Spotify. So even back to 2016 or 2015, you'll be able to find it and listen to it if you want to listen to it to see like how kind of like progressed from that point up until now. So Boxing Source movement has basically been going strong for that amount of time. So we're just trying to keep it going here to continue to talk about the sport of boxing there. So props to the Boxing Academic and Brother Terrell here for being part of this particular episode of the podcast. And I will be catching y'all later on. All right. Till then, peace out.